In this video, I'm going to be performing a logic board and CPU upgrade on this extremely rare Axiotron ModBook. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Axiotron ModBook is, essentially it was a tablet conversion for an A1181 MacBook. So if we take a look at this machine, you can see it is just a tablet. But if you look at the front here, you'll notice it looks like an A1181 MacBook, and that's because it is. It's the bottom case from an A1181 MacBook with a tablet assembly stuck on the top. So this is a very unique machine. It is a very rare machine also, and they usually go for a lot, but I actually got this one for $120. So that was a pretty good deal for one of these things, I think. And it does fully work. It's in mint condition too, which is pretty cool. And yeah, as you can see, it's on right now. Go ahead and show you it running a little bit here with the pin. So the way this works is it's essentially a Wacom tablet on top of a screen. So you can see that when I hover the pin close to the screen here, it moves the cursor around. So it does detect the pin above the screen, which is pretty cool. And if I touch the screen, that simulates a click. And as you can see, I can, highlight the desktop icons like that, open that, drag it around. It's a pretty cool machine. But it is pretty underpowered for what it is. This is, of course, based on a MacBook 4, 1 system. With a 2.4 GHz Core 2 Duo CPU and only 2 gigs of RAM installed. Let's go into more info here. Yeah, so you can see it is a MacBook 4, 1 with the 2.4 GHz Core 2 Duo. Now, what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be upgrading a MacBook 5, 2 logic board, actually the one in this machine, to a 3.06 GHz Core 2 Duo T9900. So I've actually got that CPU right here. It's a little bit dirty, as you can see, but I'll clean that up. See, it is 3.06 GHz T9900, and as you can see, this is a PGA CPU, which means it has pins on it. Now, what I'm going to be doing in order to solder this onto the machine is I'm going to be desoldering all of the pins on the CPU, and then replacing them with solder balls using my BGA stencil. Now, I have actually tested this CPU with the pins on it in another MacBook 5, 2 logic board. And the way I did that was I actually took a board that I got off eBay. I paid like $9 for this board off eBay. It's fully working. So I desoldered the original CPU, as you can see, and I soldered on a CPU socket. So that does indeed work. Of course, I have put the CPU in, and it does boot and work normally with the CPU socket installed. Now, for those of you who might think that, why not just put this board in the machine and just so I can have an upgradable CPU? Well, that unfortunately will not work for two reasons. One, the height now with a socket of the CPU compared to the North Bridge here is different, so the stock heatsink won't fit on properly, at least not without a shim on the North Bridge here to get it up to the proper height of the heatsink. But more of an issue than that is the fact that the socket hangs off of the back of the logic board. And the reason this, causes a problem is because the back of the machine is right up against the back of the logic board here, so with the CPU socket there, it's too long and it won't fit within the area towards the back of the machine. So yeah, this is just a board for testing. I did actually test a Core 2 Quad in this board, and while it did actually turn on and try to boot, it just kernel panicked most of the time, or just froze on the booting process. However, of course, it worked fine with a Core 2 Duo with this one. So now that I know that this Core 2 Duo T9900 is compatible with a MacBook 5, 2 logic board, I can go through the process of soldering it on this board without worrying about it not working. So, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the ModBook here, and then we'll begin the process. of disassembling this machine and removing its logic board to prepare for the CPU upgrade. Now, unfortunately, this machine is not in as good a shape as the bottom pan or the bottom casing on the ModBook. So anyway, I can go ahead and flip them over here. You can see that this 5.2 bottom case is a little bit scuffed up. It's not in terrible condition, but it is definitely in not as good of condition as the ModBook's bottom case. But of course I could use this bottom case, but I'd have to cut a standoff out of that, and I really don't want to do that. So I'm just gonna use the 5.2's bottom case with the ModBook tablet assembly from this machine. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to go ahead and disassemble this machine, get the logic board out, and then we'll begin the process of upgrading the CPU. So I'll go ahead and do that and resume the video. Alright, so before I get the board out, I'm going to go ahead and get all of these pins off the CPU and reball it. So I think that's the best thing to do first here. So I'll go ahead and place the CPU into my little jig here. Just like that. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on my soldering iron, apply some flux to the chip, and then in theory we should be able to just use the soldering iron to desolder all the pins. Alright, and that seems to be working. Alright, so as you can see there, I've gotten all the residual solder off of the chip. Now, one thing you might notice from this is that the solder pads are significantly larger than they are on a PGA, or a normal BGA chip. So I'll go ahead and hold that a little closer here, and you compare it with an actual BGA Core 2 Duo, you can see that the pads are a lot smaller on the actual BGA one. Now, I don't think this will cause any problems. I think the solder balls will sit low enough, or sit high enough, to where they'll make proper contact with the board when soldering it on. But I haven't done this before, so I'm not 100% sure. Now, I have seen this done before, and it has worked, so I have pretty good confidence that it will work, but I'm not 100% sure, like I said. So what we're going to do from here is I'm going to go ahead and get the BGA stencil on the chip, and then we'll go ahead and begin the process of actually applying new solder balls onto the chip. And then from there, we'll be able to tell whether or not they are going to sit high enough to actually mate to the board properly. So I'll go ahead and get this cleaned up and resume the video. Alright, so as you can see here, I've got the chip all ready to be reballed. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our solder balls here and apply them. Alright, looks like all the solder balls are in place, so now we can go ahead and turn the heat on and begin to heat the chip and melt the balls into place. Alright, so that looks pretty good, so now we'll just go ahead and wait for that to cool down and remove the stencil. Alright, so now with the stencil removed, we'll go ahead and heat it up one more time. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, so now with the chip fully reballed, we can go ahead and get the board out of the 5,2 machine and begin to remove the CPU from the board. So I'll go ahead and get that out and go ahead and resume the video. Alright, so as you can see, I've now gotten the board out of the machine. So yeah, as you can see, this is of course a 5,2 logic board by the MCP79 chipset there. So now of course what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and start to heat these little pieces of adhesive around the sides of the chip, and then we'll be able to remove those with some tweezers. Go ahead and get my hot air on here. And we'll begin heating. So as you can see, they do come off relatively easily once they're warm. Alright, so all the adhesive is off. So now what we can go ahead and do is put the board on the board preheater, get that heating up, and then we'll begin to remove the chip. Alright, so the board preheater is now heated up, so now what we can go ahead and do is apply a bit of flux around the perimeter of the chip. Alright, and with the flux applied, we can now go ahead and place the hot air nozzle over the chip and begin to remove it. Just check, make sure it's aligned. And that looks pretty good, so we'll go ahead and turn on the hot air. Alright, so the chip is now ready to be removed, so I'll go ahead and remove the hot air nozzle and take the chip off the board. There we go, so the chip has now been removed. So now what we can go ahead and do is remove all of the residual solder. And I'm actually going to do it while it's on the board preheater because that actually makes it a lot easier. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we should be good to go. Alright, so as you can see, I've gotten the board off the board preheater now. So now what we're just going to go ahead and do is remove all this residual solder. Now when I do use the solder wick on this, I'm going to actually put it on the board preheater because it actually helps get the solder off a heck of a lot easier than doing it while the board's cold. So we'll go ahead and begin here. Alright, now with that done, I'm going to go ahead and actually place the board back in the board preheater and then use the solder wick to finish the rest of it off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and resume the video. Alright, so now that the board preheater is pretty much up to temperature, what we can do now is just go ahead and take our solder wick and remove the solder. And it comes off so easily with the board being hot. Alright, and there we go. All the solder looks to be off. So now I'll go ahead and turn that off and let it cool down. And then we'll go ahead and clean the old flux off and we'll be ready to solder the new CPU on. So I'm going to go ahead and resume the video once I get the flux all cleaned up. Alright, as you can see, the board is now heated up. So now what we can go ahead and do is we can apply some flux to the pads here. Just like so. Alright, and then we'll just wipe off the excess with a paper towel. Alright, and now that we've gotten that done, we can go ahead and align the CPU and then solder it onto the board. So here's our processor right here. Go ahead and place it down. First I'll get my tweezers here to align it perfectly. Alright, and that looks to be aligned just about perfectly. So now what we'll go ahead and do is place the hot air nozzle over the board and begin to heat up the chip. Alright, so the hot air nozzle is now aligned, so I'll go ahead and turn the board preheater up a lot here. And I'm going to go ahead and wait for that to heat up a little bit before I turn on the hot air. Alright, and that should be about good for the board preheater, so now we'll go ahead and turn the hot air on. Alright, so unfortunately it turned out that the balls on the PGA chip that I reballed and attempted to solder on this board were actually not tall enough to actually make any contact with the board at all. And basically what happened was I finished heating it, and I went and took the board off the board preheater, and the chip just fell right off. It didn't even solder on whatsoever, not even one ball touched the board. So unfortunately what I had to do was I had to get another MacBook logic board that had a 3.06 GHz Core 2 Duo T9900, and I actually managed to find a 15-inch board from a mid-2009 model that had this CPU, and it was dead, and I only paid like $20 for the board. So I went ahead and gotten that board, and as you can see here, we have now successfully soldered on that CPU. Actually took me like 3 attempts to get it on right, but it is on now. And as you can see, the solder balls look perfect on that side, and they look perfect on this side as well. So, yeah, the chip soldered on just fine, and I have actually gotten an ultrasonic cleaner, and I put it through that too, so now the board is pretty much spotless, as you can see. There's a little bit of dirt right there, but other than that, the board is pretty much spotless. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is get the ModBook disassembled, and put this board into its casing, and then assemble the ModBook display and tablet assembly onto the MacBook 5.2 base with this board installed. And then after we do that, we should have a fully functional 3.06 GHz Axiotron ModBook that can run up to macOS High Sierra. So that'll be quite nice. So I'm going to go ahead and get the ModBook out, and we'll begin the process of disassembling it. Alrighty, so right here you can see I've gotten the ModBook open, and let me just say that this is quite interesting. I've never actually seen anything like this before. So let's go ahead and start over with this side of the machine. You can see there's some weird ribbon cable that just connects to where the battery connects to. I assume this is for power, because it then goes up here to this section where the MagSafe is actually plugged into this, and then this thing plugs into the logic board, and then there's this connector which goes up to the ModBook assembly here. I'm assuming, like I said, this is for power. There's a couple of modules on the back of the ModBook assembly. You can see that this must be the main ModBook controller board right here. And then there's this module, which I'm not exactly sure what this is, but I'm pretty sure this is actually a GPS module, because from what I understand, the ModBook actually adds a GPS function to these machines. You can also see there's a few more connections in here. There's one that goes to where the Bluetooth is connected, and that goes up to one of these connections where the ModBook assembly is. And then right here you can see we've got a connection that plugs into where the top case keyboard assembly is normally supposed to plug in. And as you can see, that only has 2 wires. And essentially what that does is it only functions to activate the power pins in this connector, because of course a normal MacBook has the power button connected to here as well. So yeah, that's quite interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and finish getting this disassembled. You can also see there's another custom connector for the LCD backlight right there. And like I said, all these connections will actually work with the MacBook 5.2 logic board as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish disassembling this. I'm going to get whatever this cable is out of here and unplug all this stuff that goes underneath the optical drive. And then we can just begin doing the reassembly in the MacBook 5.2 case with the upgraded MacBook 5,2 logic board. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here, get this ModBook assembly detached from this MacBook 4,1 chassis, and then we'll begin the process of installing it into the MacBook 5,2. Alrighty, so as you can see here, I have the MacBook 5,2 chassis now wired up to the ModBook top case assembly, and so everything looks good. I put this in, we've got that all connected correctly, and then I've got all these cables routed through there correctly, it seems. So now I'm just going to go ahead and close up the ModBook assembly, and then we'll go ahead and give it a quick power on test to make sure that the system actually turns on now that I've got it all wired into the MacBook 5,2 chassis. So I'm going to go ahead and get that closed up, and we'll go ahead and give it a test, so I'll be right back. Alrighty, as you can see here, I've got the ModBook assembly hooked up to the system. Yeah, you can see right there that everything is wired up and ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it in, turn it on, and see if it works. So we've got the green light. Let's go ahead and power on the ModBook. And look at that, it is working. So I do actually have the hard drive installed from the original ModBook. So I'm going to go ahead and let this boot up, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the system and see if everything seems to be working properly. Alright, so as you can see there, the machine has finished booting up, and it looks like it is working perfectly. You can see the pin works. Yep, that works. So let's go ahead into About This Mac. And look at that, we've got a 3.06 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo detected. I do only have 2 gigs of memory installed at the moment, but I do plan on upgrading this to 8 gigabytes once I get some that'll work in this. The 4 gig DDR2 modules are actually not that cheap, so I'll have to see what I can find. But yeah, here are the system profiler specs right here. You can see it is now a MacBook 5,2. Like I said, the 3.06 GHz Core 2 Duo with 6 megabytes of L2 cache, and it all looks to be working perfectly. So let's go ahead and check the graphics, and as you can see there, it's got the NVIDIA GeForce 9400M detected, and right there you can see that it detects the ModBook's display. So I'll go ahead and quit this, shut it down, and then we'll go ahead and begin and finish reassembling the machine, and then we'll actually test the ModBook software under macOS High Sierra, because I'm actually very curious to see if it actually works in High Sierra. So we'll go ahead and shut the system down, get it fully reassembled, and then we'll begin testing the software. So I'll be right back. Alright, so as you can see here, I've gotten the Axiotron ModBook completely reassembled. You can see that the top case is completely on and flush with the system. So now what we can go ahead and do is power it on. Now I do have an SSD installed now with a copy of High Sierra on it that I installed using my High Sierra Patcher application. And it is an APFS formatted disk, so it will show the verbose APFS boot implementation at launch, or when I turn the system on. And I also installed 4 gigs of system memory, so it should run half decently. So I'm going to go ahead and power it on, and we'll see if it boots. And as you can see, the system is now on. It did actually chime, but the volume was just very low. So in a second here, it should begin to boot up. Alright, and as you can see, it is starting to load the APFS bootloader. And now the system is booting up. So I'm going to go ahead and let the system boot up, and once it starts up, then we'll go ahead and take a look at it. Oh, I guess it's already started because it's an SSD, but let's go ahead and enter the password here. and it is going to tell me that I need to update some of the system patches. I'll go ahead and ignore that for right now. And as you can see, the touchscreen works perfectly fine in High Sierra. It actually is perfectly calibrated as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get the copy of the Axiotron ModBook software that I imaged from the original discs that I got with this system, and then we'll go ahead and try to install it and see what happens. Alright, so I've just finished downloading a copy of the Axiotron software, so let's go ahead and see if it will let us install it. Of course, Gatekeeper won't let us. Open. And it is allowing us to install it, so let's see what happens here. Alright, it wants us to log out. As you can hear, the fan is running. There is actually a process taking up a lot of CPU usage, and look at that! The keyboard, the on-screen keyboard is working. So let's go ahead and log in here. I do have an external keyboard hooked up, of course. That's pretty cool. So far, it seems to be working perfectly fine. Pin tablet calibration, okay. And there's High Sierra saying that it's not 64-bit. I know. And we've got the Axiotron system preferences pane there. Let's go ahead and open that. And apparently that doesn't work in High Sierra. I mean, at least the tablet is calibrated, so I guess if I did need to calibrate it, I could just boot another copy of OS X that actually supports the software, and then calibrate it from there. So let's see if the Axiotron Quick Clicks application actually works. That actually seems to work just fine. So we've got the on-screen keyboard, so I can use that. Let's go ahead and open up Text Edit here. And yeah, that works just fine. So go ahead and quit that. Now I believe there is also some sort of GPS software that it installs. Yeah, GPS utility. Not optimized, of course. And this doesn't appear to be working at all. Oh well. And then there's one more thing it installs, and that's InkBook. And I don't really know how this works, but I guess it's working. I mean, the application's open. So yeah, it does seem like most of the Axiotron software actually works in High Sierra, except for the calibration utility. And this actually never even worked in the stock Snow Leopard install, so I'm not really sure what's up with that. But yeah, it seems to be working just fine. So that is the upgrade of this Axiotron ModBook to a MacBook 5.2 logic board after upgrading it to a 3.06 GHz Core 2 Duo CPU. Now before I end this video, I'm going to go ahead and download a copy of Geekbench, and I'm going to Geekbench this machine and see what it scores. So I'm going to go ahead and get all that downloaded and Geekbench run, and then I'll show you what the scores are. Alright, so Geekbench has just finished running, and look at that. We get a score of 1851 single core and 3301 multi-core. Now that is a huge improvement over a stock MacBook 5.2. Now let's go ahead and actually search for that. So yeah, as you can see, there are a decent amount of the P7350 and P70, what are the other ones? These are all 2 gigahertz, but yeah, here's one with a P7450, and you can see that those get 1050, 1831, and yeah, except for this one, which for some reason is a Core i7. I'm sure this is a Hackintosh of some sort, but yeah. Anyway, I definitely have the fastest MacBook 5.2 here, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, so that has been the upgrade of this Axiotron ModBook. Hope you enjoyed this video.